English language is one of the GCSEs where you can go up grades massively, okay? Because you don't need to know content. I have seen people go from 5s in their mocks to 8s in the exam. I've seen people go up really a lot in this subject, okay? I love it. It's actually my favorite GCSE. And in this video, I'm going to be teaching you guys how to master that 40-mark story in paper 1. Now, if you're new here, make sure you subscribe, make sure you leave a like. I got a 9 in English language, and I got my story to the point where it was getting marked 40 out of 40, and I did the same for the article, so make sure you're subscribed for when I post about the article, speech, and all of that stuff. Now, let's get straight into this video, okay? So the first point I want to make is it's really important that you have read and understand the mark scheme. Now, I'm going to put in the description a generic mark scheme, okay? But long story short, it's split into 2 points, SPAG and then content and organization. For SPAG, you basically need a good range of words, accurate spelling, a lot of punctuation, accurate sentences. Content and organization, long story short, it needs to be engaging, it needs to be communicating, and you need to communicate well, and it needs to be compelling, okay? Just read the mark scheme to really see if you can understand what it is they're testing you on, because I don't think students appreciate it enough. An examiner is going to have your story open, and they're going to have the mark scheme open, and they're going to be thinking, right, do they meet this criteria? Do they do this? So not enough students think that. When the examiner is looking at a story in a few months' time, they're going to have the mark scheme up there. So what we need to do is play to the mark scheme and really understand what they want. Now, here's some common mistakes that students make, okay? They get too caught down in the plot. They think that they need to write a Shakespearean level plot with 50 characters, 50 storylines, whatever, okay? They overcomplicate it, and they spend so much time working on the plot and trying to explain a complicated plot that they don't do enough time describing, writing really well. And that's what the examiner wants, okay? So my next piece of advice then is you need to read and look at a lot of high mark answers. How are you going to know what to do? How are you going to get 40 out of 40 if you don't know what a 40 out of 40 looks like? I'm selling my 40 out of 40 story for just £2.99 in the description, so go check that out, and that helped a lot of students last year, okay? And what I've done as well is annotated it. I've got 2 copies, my story and then my annotated story. And I think one thing there is a lot of students are shocked at the amount of paragraphs in it, okay? It's not, your story shouldn't just be like 4 blocky paragraphs, okay? So another way of doing this, like I said, is the examiner's reports. Read them, okay? They are so essential. It's a big document of examiner's comments. Comments such as these that are so useful, okay? The examiner is giving you a device. You have to read that if you want to get 40 out of 40. Get in the head of the examiner. Think what they think, okay? Now, here's the main part of my advice then in terms of actually writing the story and all that sort of stuff. Now, you can plan for your story, okay? Especially if you do Edexcel, you're going to get 2 questions and you can prepare a story, and then whatever it is in the exam, slightly change your story to meet that. So my story was about a run, and in my actual exam, I walked in there and my question was, either write about a time when you had to stand up for somebody or write about a time when the weather was memorable. I wrote my run, which I knew was 40 out of 40, but I just made it rain. So I added that in there and adapted my story to meet that. So that's really powerful, especially if you do Edexcel, AQA and the other exam boards. I don't know about the other examples, but I know for AQA it's a little bit harder. Okay, here's what your story needs though. The key word is variety, okay? Think of your story like you think of the food wheel. For a healthy diet, you need a variety, okay? You need some greens, you need some fruit, you need some dairy, all that sort of stuff makes up a healthy diet. For a great story, you need a huge variety, okay? Here's what I mean by that. Number 1, you need a variety of really good vocabulary, okay? Really good words. Often, the best answers just sound really fancy and they sound like they have some really good words in them. To do this, all you need to do is learn some words and set it as your phone background or put it up on your wall or flashcard them and use them in your writing. Okay, this is pretty easy to do. Google grade 9 words, ChatGPT some grade 9 words. I learned some words and I just put them in my writing and they sounded fancy and that was good. Okay, so learn some really impressive fancy words that you can use in your writing and just write them, okay? You need a variety of sentence starters and paragraphs and all that sort of stuff. People think it's just blocky paragraphs. It's not. We need some short paragraphs in there, some long paragraphs. Think about how you can use your paragraphs for effect. We also need a range or a variety of techniques. Every technique you can think of, okay? Simile, personification, alliteration, metaphors, rule of 3, semantic fields, everything put it in your writing. You should have an example of every technique. Too many students think, oh, I'll just chuck in a simile here, and most of the time I'm just going to explain what's going on, but I might put some alliteration here. You need everything. Every single technique you can think of, try and put it in there. Show off, okay? Don't just narrate a story. We really want to make the reader feel something, okay? And again, the final thing that you need variety for is punctuation. Again, every single piece of punctuation. My advice here, you write down the side of the margin a punctuation checklist and you tick it off, okay? You've got to get it all in. If you struggle with a semicolon, ask ChatGPT to come up with a sentence with a semicolon that you know is correct, and you can use that in the exam, okay? So that's variety. You've really got to make sure you do that. If you do that and you've planned it and it's a clear structure, you're going to get at least 30 marks, genuinely, as long as your spelling and all that sort of stuff is accurate as well. Now, I think students also underrate how important the introduction is. It's crucial that the introduction of your story, okay, is interesting in some way. Too many students make it boring. Come up with something interesting, okay? ChatGPT can help. Look at my story will help. Looking at other stories will help. You've got to interest and engage the examiner straight away. Now, the reason this is because psychologically they're going to read the start, and that's going to, in their head, to make them think, right, this is a great story, this is a mediocre story, or, I've seen this so many times, it's just a bit boring, okay? So even if your story is good or bad and the intro doesn't compare to the rest, that introduction is so important, same as the conclusion. So I spent a lot of time thinking, how can I interest from the start of my story, okay? I hope that video was helpful. Honestly, the story is not that bad. And the final point I want to make is practice. You've got to practice it. There's still time to practice it. Get your teacher to mark it if possible. If not, ChatGPT, but make sure you ask it to mark you harshly, okay? That's really important. Keep practicing. If you do that, you're going to write a really good story, and that's 25% of your grade. It's so important. I knew if I wanted to get a 9, it focused around being really good at the story and the article. I'm going to do a separate video on the article at some point. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video. And yeah, just make sure you let me know how your exams go and all that stuff. And I'd really recommend buying my stories. Only £2.99. And I'm also selling some story plans as well. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.